All right, hello, and welcome to the Todd and Taylor Show. I'm Todd A.
I'm Taylor Trask.
And this is another coffee and comics edition where we talk about the coffee we're drinking, and then we talk about the comics we are reading. How are you doing, Taylor?
I'm lovely. We were just chatting offline. If you haven't yet, go to Amazon Prime right now and watch the Rose Parade as hosted by Cord and Trish, or Tish. Nothing to do with comics whatsoever, but it is funny. It's Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon, and I was just right prior to this. I was waiting for my lovely Windows 10 update to finally take hold. So I was having that in the background, and I'm going to continue watching that later today too. How about you?
This is our first show of the new year of 2018.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is this the third calendar year that we have done this show? I think. Did we started this. Goodness gracious! I think June of 2015. I think it's June. Wow. Okay.
Somewhere around there, and then because then we 2016.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. Because we started
the fourth calendar year that we have done the show.
16, 17, 18. Yeah, we're getting close.
16, 17, 18. That's amazing.
Wow.
Anyway, so yeah, the Rose Parade would be a great way to kick off the new year.
Do yourself a favor. Start the new year right. No, it was great. It's just like it's fun to. The only reason I really bring that up is it's kind of fun to acknowledge that we live in a world now where even things like the Rose Parade, we don't. It's not appointment TV. You can just watch it any old time.
True.
It's like you can. This idea of having to like be in front of your screen at a certain day and time is just it's such a novel concept. I was home over Christmas and like my parents still have regular cable, and a lot of that, we had to if we were going to watch a movie on HBO or something, we had to okay, at 8:00, we'll all gather around, watch this movie. It's such a weird archaic notion. I'm sure at some point some hipsters will, they'll call it slow TV and they'll make it a big popular thing again.
Now we're talking. Oh yeah. It'll be like a retro thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'll tell you what, this is the most excited I've been to talk about the coffee portion of our show. So I just want to jump into that. What are you drinking this morning?
Well, this morning I am drinking some of the fruits of my Christmas bounty. There is a lovely little coffee shop near my hometown of Wall, South Dakota, and they serve Bad River coffee. It's the Bad River Coffee Company, which is based in the area. And they have some really good beans, and they actually have a mug that has their logo on it. So I'm drinking Bad River coffee, AeroPress of the Bad River coffee in my Bad River mug, and I am quite content. How about you?
Well, you and I talked earlier this week, and I told you that one of my New Year's resolutions is to learn how to make a decent cup of coffee for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And you also know that I prefer the iced coffee. Anyone who listens to this show knows that I prefer iced coffee. I don't like hot liquids. That's the devil's temperature. And so,
were you somehow traumatized as a kid by that one old lady who went through McDonald's and like burned her crotch or whatever and had to sue? She was like the big lawsuit against McDonald's. Remember that? That was like the big deal. It's like she sued. And then I remember every time my family would go through the drive-thru and we'd get coffee or something, like we'd all have to be like, okay, now be very careful because it might burn us as well. Like that seems like that was like a big thing when we were kids, or at least when I was a kid, like back in the day.
I just I keep with traditional Mormon values. I have 8 wives. I don't drink hot liquids because that's the devil's temperature.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just I'm not a big soup fan. I don't really care for hot liquids like that. So and iced coffee is like that's what got me into coffee. And anyway, so I was very excited this morning because so I've really diligently for the past week approached this New Year's resolution. I talked to some coffee nerds that I know about why it is that I actually prefer Starbucks iced coffee, why I don't like most cold brews. Although I did have one the other night that was pretty good. It was a homemade one. Anyway, also the other night on Friday night, my friend Eris said, hey, we were talking about different, he was the one who served me the cold brew that I liked. And we were talking about different, like my challenges with making a good cup of iced coffee. And he gave me this great suggestion that I was so excited to try this morning, which was to ice some, like to literally make ice cubes out of some coffee.
Ooh, I like that.
And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Cause I often, when I do it myself, it's a little too like watery often.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, so I've gone through all this stuff. The tips I got this week, I'll keep people updated if they give a shit. But the tips I got this week were a friend had told me that maybe what I like about Starbucks is that they over roast their beans.
Ooh,
And,
good point.
and maybe that's what I actually like, is that sort of burnt over roasted flavor. And it's, and which I like too, because it makes it sound like I actually have a palate for this thing.
Well,
So
that's funny though. That's usually the reason people don't like Starbucks. Like, oh, it tastes.
exactly, like a coffee nerd wouldn't like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I went to a Starbucks and spoke to a barista, and she told me, I told her, some of my travails in this, and she said, try the Kenyan blend. So that's what I'm
Mm,
doing right now. So I got the
yeah.
Kenyan blend. I've made several pots this week. And actually the one I've got right now might be the best one. So I iced some of those last night,
Hmm.
and made this today, and it's just the Kenyan and some 2% milk, because that's what I had in my fridge. Um, yeah, and I'm sort of taking notes on all this. I'll try some whole milk after this run of experiments, and I'll try the Guatemalan next, because that's what she told me also might be good. But if we opened our chat before we started recording, and you may have heard me cursing, because when I iced the coffee last night, like when I poured it in my ice cube tray, um,
Hmm.
it was cool. It was cool at the time. I didn't pour hot coffee into it like a plastic tray,
Hmm.
and then iced it. But apparently that like just doesn't break out like normal ice does. So I'm like twisting the tray, and I was like, "You son of a like what?" It's like it's just lodged in there, like, and I'm like cracking the tray trying to get the cubes out. This is all happening while Taylor's on the line, and then I had the sense to just leave the tray sitting there while I finished the rest of the cup, and they of course loosened, and I pulled them out and put them in the cup. So anyway, yeah, it's pretty rich. I'm pretty happy with it this morning.
You
So
this is you're stumbling on to one of the most attractive elements of coffee, which is sort of the chemistry that
yeah,
goes into it. It's like the more you start to tinker and tweak with heat and time, and like it just, that's honestly, to me, the drinking of it is obviously useful and all that. Like we have a friend in Portland who he refers to coffee as just a caffeine distribution system. He doesn't really care what it tastes like, or he doesn't buy into all the bullshit of like, like an AeroPress would just bore him. But like for me, it's just like, okay, like the more technically intricate it is. And in fact, I would even go so far, like one of my favorite Breaking Bad episodes is the one where Walt shows up at the lab for the first time, Gus's lab, and Gail's there. And like they start their working day, and he walks over to like this sort of big chemistry set. And he's like, "What's this?" And he's like, "Ah." And basically Gail shows Walt how he's making the perfect cup of coffee, like using chemistry. And I was just like, that is the sexiest thing I've ever seen. And granted, like for the show, like they added a lot of extra, like, bits and bobs and things. Like if you wanted to do what Gail did in real life, it wouldn't be nearly as complicated, but it just looks so cool. And I'm like, that's actually, that just seeing that, like I'm so susceptible to some things. Like I just saw that, and it just baked into my mind this like inescapable need to like be geeky about coffee. And so like
well,
for the last 3 years, it's kind of been where my head is.
yeah, that's I like that. I've resisted becoming that person for a long time. Because when I was a non-coffee drinker, there was I had this definite feeling of like I will never get someone else's cup of coffee right. Whether I'm making it or just ordering it. Like
Yeah.
everyone has their own little, set of demands that they want from the barista, and you'll never repeat it right. You do
Mm-hmm.
those office coffee runs. It's like, and a half calf upside down decaf latte. I don't remember. But I did know when I sort of finally made the leap from tea to coffee that one thing I did like about it was, oh, it's always a little different. Like, the person that makes it always makes it a little bit different for me, even if it's just iced coffee and they're pouring it out of a pitcher. Like just the chemistry between like the milk and coffee and syrup or whatever would be
Mm-hmm.
different. So that was probably helped me get in this mindset. I do like the way you put it about chemistry. I hadn't thought about that. And it reminds me of this great passage from John Hodgman's Vacation Land, which I've been reading, where he talks about why he prefers liquor to wine, because liquor is chemistry, where someone has figured out how to, distill it and everything to make this perfect this perfect liquid, whereas wine is like religion, and it's just murky and nobody understands the magic that's going into it, and it never really, you can't ever really have the same experience, and the expensive ones are just as might be worse than the cheap ones. And yeah, I
somewhere the sommelier community is shouting out in terror all together, like, how dare you, that's not right.
John Hodgman. So
send your letters and complaints to John Hodgman, care of whatever the hell his little empire is called.
Yeah, Judge John Hodgman.
Judge John Hodgman. Just put that. No address is even needed. You just send it to him. They'll know. They'll know where to go. But anyway, let's pivot, because the meat of the matter is the books we're reading, as well as the coffee we're drinking. And I want to start with you because I'm curious. We haven't talked for a while. I'm curious what's on your list. I know you did a big Drawn and Quarterly run on their sale, and I don't know if your pick is from there, but I just know you've been reading a lot lately.
It is from the Drawn and Quarterly booty that I received. So I've been this has been sitting on my bedside table for a while, and it is definitely a single sitting read, but it's one that I will go back to, and that anyone who reads it will go back to. It is called Mooncop by Tom Gauld, or I have this feeling that his last name is probably pronounced Gold or something like that, but it's Gauld. Gauld maybe, but he's a Scottish author, and it is just so a couple, maybe in our last Coffee and Comics, but very recently I talked about Johnny Sun's everyone's a Lieben when you're a Lieben too, and Mooncop is it's not about aliens, but it has I don't know. It just gave me that same feel, probably because I come to this from so many like hard sci-fi, or not hard sci-fi, but fantasy sci-fi books, like Saga and superhero books. So reading Everyone's a Alien and then reading this back to back, we're like, oh yeah, there's like different ways to talk about aliens and space, and it's just it is a very primarily a visual book. And his style is really cool. It is basically like almost like a newspaper. Maybe not editorial cartoon, but definitely not editorial cartoon, because those are those like caricature things. I'm thinking like New Yorker kind of cartoons or something like that.
That's a good. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at your screenshots while you describe it. I remember this is a book that you always kind of tend to see in comic shops in like their hardbound section. So I always pass by the cover. I'm glad somebody's finally read it, because I've always been curious.
Yeah, and exactly the same. Like when Drawn and Quarterly did their Black Friday sale, I gravitated immediately towards this because it was one that I'd passed so many times before and thought that is a really pretty book. And I got to check it out. And I'm so happy that I did. So his figures are almost like stick figure-ish, they're built out a little bit, and there's details on them, like, clothing and in this case, like a breathing apparatus and helmet and stuff like that. So it's not exactly a simple drawing. These are detailed drawings, but I guess the style is sort of simple. And and maybe this is more of like a European kind of thing as well, because he's Scottish, even though I guess that's not really Europe, that's just Scotland. But United Kingdom, is that
somewhere all the Scots cry out in terror and like, the wine,
I know,
the country of Scotland has been
they're I'm sure they're happy with my pronouncements about the chemistry of Scottish liquors. Anyway, it just concerns, as you might imagine, a cop on the moon. And it is largely wordless. Like there are a lot of just panels of the habitats and vehicles and terrain of the moon, with this sky dotted by the stars in the background. And it's like, of course, this is the conundrum I always have when we do these, is like, I don't even want to give away any of the plot because I think it's so cool, but I know it's probably necessary. So he's a cop on the moon. There aren't a lot of people who have colonized the moon. and you can imagine there's not a lot of crime. So he goes about his day, and it's just sort of a lonely little moon cruiser, sort of like Luke's sand speeder in Star Wars Episode 4. And he just sort of floats around. He doesn't encounter anything, and then he goes back to the base and he reports on his computer, crimes, discovered 0, crimes investigated 0, and it's always like your crime solving rate is 100%. So, yeah, there is a plot to it, but it's just one of those nice. Gosh, nice is such a terrible adjective to use in this case. It's just it's like an indie movie or like another indie comic where it's not. It's not an exciting. It's not like things are blowing up and there's emergencies to deal with or a lot of action. This is just sort of an existential look at what if you were a cop on the moon and the moon had not really been colonized. In the early days of colonization, what would it be like? So he goes to the same lunar donut dispenser, like a vending machine. And then one day this robot is removing the vending machine and the robot tells him, well, we're going to open a mini cafe here. And he's like, well, that's weird. There really aren't a lot of people who come here. And then, so then he starts going every day to the Lunar Donuts mini cafe, and they're all just in this like awesome little style of like, it looks like a donut shop with a giant donut on top of it, but it's encased in a glass dome.
Kind of looks like a snow globe. I'm looking at that.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course, he and the one person who works in the donut shop have this little relationship that they develop, and she says, you're the only one who comes here. And he requests a transfer. His transfer is denied because they can't train anyone else to work on the moon. It's as his housing is in these like sort of modular apartments, sort of like if you imagine on The Martian, where every little habitat was like a different sort of space RV. They have like the lab and the living quarters.
Oh,
and stuff
yeah.
like that. So his is just this sort of stack of different apartments. And at the beginning, I think there are 8 at the beginning as they show it, or maybe just 4. But anyway, there are several sort of stacked on top of each other. But as people are leaving the moon or they're not able to rent these and stuff, the robots just come and take the modules away. So his, there's just this great thing of like he has to interact with the super of his building, about why his apartment has been moved. And yeah, it's just a really wonderful book in that way. As you are looking at the pictures online, is there anything you would say like to describe that art that I'm not doing a good job of?
Well, I just think it's worth noting that the color palette is entirely blue
Great.
and gray.
Yes.
Like the way they depict space is blue, is that really deep, kind of rich, dark blue, and then all the line drawings are just gray and white, which is great because it creates a sense of sort of, for me at least, it creates a sense of loneliness and just sort of monotony, which I get. If the story is him just kind of going about his day, a lot of the time, like it's good to have that exist in sort of a sterile monotonous kind of landscape, and just sort of you as a reader get brought into that a lot faster. Like I like the books where there's an intentional graphic sort of rendering that enhances or layers on top of this, the narrative itself, that really sucks you in faster. So you can do that. One question I had for you though, based on just sort of the brief synopsis and story point, is one of the themes, or is the central theme just man's inability to control his own destiny, like being part of a system, sort of surrendering to that system? That kind of seems based on like what you're describing.
I think you could take that out of it. It's definitely not heavy-handed or,
Okay.
That's you wouldn't come away with it exactly like that's the point of it, but it might be something that occurs to you as a reader. You did hit upon one of the key words, which is monotony. And I think there's just something so cool, especially in this medium, like you described, like the color palette is monochrome between, with only that dark blue, that deep blue is sort of the, part of the monochrome palette.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's no other colors in it, just grays and blues and whites. And that adds to that monotonous feeling. And it is just that twist on life in space is going to be super exciting. It's the
Mhm.
opposite of that. It's like he has a day job. Not a lot happens at his day job. He visits the same person in his coffee shop every morning, much like I visit the same baristas every morning. It's just it's you know, I love those I guess where I'm trying to tie that theme together with the Everyone's a Alien book is it is so simply rendered that you
Mhm.
might mistake it as being like a book for children, but
Mhm.
the subject matter is actually something that you're not going to appreciate unless you're an adult and have kind of experienced these things like the monotony of a day job or sort of the loneliness of your existence. Yeah, it's just incredible in that way where it sort of sets a tone. It stays on that tone. There's a couple of really funny moments and a couple of little surprises when information's discovered, but there's nothing nothing super dramatic that happens.
I do like the fact that, in terms of graphic novels and comics, mostly anytime space is involved, there's something exciting or
Yeah,
mysterious or like, life threatening. And it's like, we always kind of associate space in a dramatized romantic nature. And so it's kind of nice to see the medium produce something that is the opposite of that. That's just mundane. Like, look, and this is what's great about that is the one side, we need the one side, we need the fantastical side to inspire us to reach higher. Like all of these, everything from, even on the movie side, like Star Wars, Star Trek, but on the graphic novel side, like all the black science, which I know you're a big fan of, Nowhere Man. There's just a lot of indie trades and things that really romanticize space, and we need that to wonder and imagine what could be. But this kind of thing is important too, because honestly, like when we start going out into the stars to colonize, a lot of it's going to be probably this. Where it's just very, it's kind of nice to juxtapose that with this is probably what it's going to more be like, and we have to get used to this too. We have to kind of embrace monotony, embrace the fact that there's going to be a whole lot less of us in some of these situations, for a
yeah,
while.
and
That's just it's prescient.
yeah, and another word occurred to me, which is just sort of the absurdity of existence.
Yeah.
Which is
Ooh,
so.
I like that.
This does a great job of, there's this old Jerry Seinfeld bit where he talks about like only a man would bring a car to the moon. Like that's such a man thing to do. Like we went to a moon and it wasn't good enough, so we had to drive around on it. Like we're in a car. And this is like that's a funny perspective on it, but in another way it's just kind of absurd and like uh borderline like deranged. And
Mhm.
this gets to that point of like, why would you put a cop on the moon when it's not even that populated? um but that's a thing that we would probably do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Start colonizing it. So some politician is going to go, well, what if someone steals all the science? And so they're
Yeah.
like, yep, we got to put a security guard up there. That's just how
Wow.
it goes. And then it ends up that they're really doing nothing. There's just some great scenes in this, like just like sort of a multi-panel spread of like his little cruiser going across this vast unpopulated moon desert. There's
Mhm.
just nothing there. And then one of the like funny ways that the author artist points out how absurd this existence is every once in a while there will be like a tree or a plant and it's in one of those little snow globe domes. So it's like we went to the moon and then we planted a tree, but of course it can't grow there, so we had to put it in its own little like terrarium on the moon.
Wow.
So
Wow.
he's driving through this vast landscape and then he'll just pass like a tree, you know.
One of the things I always ask on this show is digital or physical, and from what
Oh
I'm understanding, I'm just going to guess based on what I'm seeing on Google Images, this is definitely something you'll want to get physically instead of digitally.
yeah, for sure. It's really just not it's not going to have the same impact. Also, like that Johnny Sun book, it's just you got to be holding it in your hands and kind of experience this half hour, 45 minutes, or whatever it takes to go through the pages and read it. So it is a good book. This is one of those books too where I just want to lend it out. You know,
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
so I think I understand, this is one of the things we've talked about maybe offline more than we do online about that like expense of that's one of the things we've talked about buying trade paperbacks versus single issues is
Mhm.
you start buying a lot and it's like, oh man, if I get into a story, single issues, and I know I'm going to want the trade, well, do I keep buying the single issues?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
need that in order to create demand for the trade. But on the other hand, like I already want the trade. Like I don't want to spend double the money. This one, so one of the things that's always been in the back of my mind as we've had those conversations is what of these books would I feel comfortable just sort of handing over to a friend and be like, read this, don't read it, pass it on, don't pass it on. Like, I think you'll enjoy it. And this is
Mhm.
one of those books where I'd like to just sort of send it out into the world and see if it comes back.
That's great. And it looks pretty small too. It looks like it would fit on the
Yeah.
shelf, like almost next to Seconds or, a smaller manga or something.
Yeah, it is like a smaller format. It's really, I mean, uh, Drawn and Quarterly, are very generous in their large books. I mean, you can get some of these graphic novels. We've talked about Guy Delisle and I can't
Sorry.
remember the dude that I just was talking about. Never mind, I can't remember his name. But where it'll just be like a really thick book that's like beautifully published and hundreds of pages. And this is not like that. Like this is very slim. Um, like I said, it's a one sitting read. It's something that I think you'll just, if you're in the right mood for it, you're just going to kind of get sucked in and just read it all at once. It's going to be hard to sort of break up, honestly.
Nice.
And it's maybe actually the pages are numbered. It's 94 pages, but it doesn't
Oh,
even feel that way.
okay.
So yeah. Um, I if you've got more questions for me, I'm happy to entertain them. But there's also not a lot I can say. Look up
Yeah.
Mooncop by Tom Gauld and check it out yourself.
Yeah, no, I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to spoil it in any further way. I'm just looking again at some of these page samples from Google Images, and I like the way the panels, kind of going back to the physical versus digital. It seems like, with digital, you're always looking at one panel at a time. There are some books that you kind of need to see all the panels in your peripheral view for reasons for the story. And I'm looking, this seems like one of those books where you kind of want
Yeah.
to see it all flow in this way, and the way the panels are set up, it really kind of flows. Now, like I'm looking at one, this is probably page 6 and 7, and it just shows there's not any physical people in it. It's just different shots of the moon with different stuff on it, and just kind of you kind of see and take that in. So I feel like, I go back to that because it's really at this juncture, it's really important. Some books, some stories, the physicality of it and especially the flow of it really works better in digital versus physical or vice versa.
Right.
I always want to kind of come back to that because it really does affect how I personally enjoy these books and how others may approach them too. So
that is such a great way of describing that, because I think with some superhero books, it's cool to kind of flip from panel to panel. I mean, the artists, they're all, are very conscientious about making these beautiful layouts and full page versions and stuff. But sometimes you feel like you're not really going to lose something in the digital. But I think that's really what you gain reading Mooncop in its physical form is in your peripheral vision, you're going to see the panels ahead.
Yeah.
And it, it's not like you're going to see action in the corner of your eye and skip ahead to see what that action is. You're gonna like be in this world and realize even in the periphery, like it's boring and monotonous and absurd. And
it's kind of like, well, to me, there's almost like a subgenre or a subclassification of some of these books that I almost like to call like comics as an art installation, where like it's less like, a movie or a TV show, the way that Postal is. Like on a previous episode, I said, really read Postal digitally because you're really just looking at storyboards and it flows better. This seems more like you have to take it in. Like if you were to go into a museum and just see this all printed out on the wall, or like represented like in framed versions, like it almost kind of feels like you're ingesting that kind of experience versus just a straight narrative.
Yeah, totally. No, that's a great way of putting it. Mooncop, Tom Gauld, Drawn and Quarterly.
Excellent.
What is your book pick for this week?
Well, my pick is something I've mentioned and have name checked a few times in past Todd and Taylor episodes. It's one that dearly love, but was a little bit hesitant because I always try to reread or read for the first time the books that we talk about here. And this is one that it's one of the only things that I own on my library that actually kind of unnerved me. And so going back through and rereading it, I was just like, a little of that PTSD kind of drudged back up because I was like, oh God, it's very prescient and very relevant to today and where we are. But it's just like, but it's a book that I feel everybody who's involved in technology and especially AI and especially like just thinking about the future needs to read. And it's called Ancestor by Matt Sheehan and Malachi Ward. And it's the trade paperback. It's like the graphic novel that they put out. Now, this is important to note. Ancestor debuted in the Image monthly magazine Island.
Yes.
That I don't know if they're still doing, but they did it for about a year and a half to 2 years in like 2015, 2016. And it's it's really cool. If you can go back, especially those first 5 or 6 islands, basically it's not a new concept, but they basically have this magazine. It's edited and it has 4 or 5 different like single issue or even like single page stories that, maybe like month 1 you see, these stories, maybe month 2 continues 2 of those, but introduces 3 more. Month 3 they come back and they kind of keep picking up different story threads or different stories as the creators come up with them. It's a great way for creators to work on maybe even more obscure or more indie titles than Image would even be used to, and get them in front of an audience in a way that's not going to be prohibitive. You're not taking a gamble on a single issue, and Image isn't gambling on publishing it, but they'll take 4 or 5 cool things that they think might have a chance, put it in this Island magazine for $7.99, and then you can introduce more stories that way. And what's worth noting, I think all of the Island generated shorts have since been collected as trade paperbacks or just graphic novels in their own right. I know 3 of my favorite stories from those I now own, and this is one of them. And I remember when Ancestor debuted, the art style was kind of different from what I was used to seeing. The coloring was really good. The shading was really good. Just it had sort of a just a cinematic feel, but just it was kind of an art style I wasn't quite used to. Very engaging. When we've talked quite a bit about like if the story is good but the art doesn't jive with me, I usually like Black Science is a great example because I just don't like that art at this juncture. I may 10 years from now I may love it, but right now I just can't. It just doesn't appeal to me, so I really can't dive into it the way you have. And I know there's stuff that I like that you've mentioned the same thing. So this is one of those where I'm like, the art's really cool, but the concept is really, really, really strong. And it's a 4-part story. And I'm not kidding by saying each part is more batshit crazy than the part that preceded it. And it all has to do with this place sometime in the future. And our protagonist is just this man named Peter. And they live in and I would assume this is, this could easily be 10 to 15 years from our future right now, considering how fast things are going. And it's a future where the entire internet, and basically instead of carrying around your mobile phone, the entire internet and just kind of like the entire interface for technology are these like floating globules that kind of like float around your head, and they're all like wired into each other, wired into you. So like, for example, Peter joins his friends, they go to a bar. There's no bartender because what you do is you just walk behind the bar and you download different drink recipes and you can make your own drink, just like right away. It's just tapping into the internet without a physical interface, and these little globs just kind of float around your head. And Peter, they kind of early on established the fact that Peter has these like kind of like panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And I think it's because he's in this sort of like, he's just this guy who's organically had to live in this technologically driven world. Because you walk around and everybody's got these little globules, so you just see like these little like floating yellow like droplets around everybody's head. And you never have to ask who this person is, because as soon as you look at somebody, the globules will form the information and tell you who somebody is. Or they'll tell you, where they last were. Like, hey, this is Katie. She just saw U2 and came back from a U2 concert. So like you basically have like Facebook at all times, all around you for everybody. Well, they get invited, Peter and his friends, and like one of his friends in particular invites them all to this party kind of out in the woods, and I'm imagining this to be like, West Coast, Oregon or Seattle, very, very wooded, northwesty looking area. They go out to this like compound mansion in the woods, and it's this party sponsored by the guy who co-invented the what was his name? Matheson. But he invented the technology, or co-invented the technology that creates the globs, like the human interface internet. So they're going to his party. And right away they get there. As soon as they pass through his border, his property border, the system fails. There's a service failure, and they're like, all of them, like their little globules stop working, and they all kind of freak out a little bit, and they say, "Oh no, that's a suppression field." So from that point on, they don't have access to all their information, so they're sort of having to readjust to just existing in the world normally. And Peter, the main guy, he actually kind of likes it. He's finally alone with his thoughts. His anxiety is a little bit better. So they go in, and I'm just kind of describing chapter 1. They go in, they go to this party. There's tons of people there. Imagine like a party hosted by Elon Musk, where there's just all these kind of very wealthy VCs and cultural sort of celebrities and different things, and intellectuals, and just all these people there. Matheson is there, the main guy, and you kind of realize that there's something quirky about Matheson. He's kind of speaking about utopian ideals, and he's talking about like what they can do. And towards the end of chapter 1, Peter goes down, and his other friend is down there, and they realize that all the doors have been locked and all the windows have been locked, and nobody can get out. And so you're like, oh shit, what's that about? From this point on, and I don't want to get into the details, but from this point on, the entire book, like you get to the next chapter, and it's like it continues. It's the same thread, but it takes a wild turn in a completely different direction. And you're like, and you just sort of, I don't want to spoil it because it really kind of throws me. And then chapter 3 is even worse. And what you realize is that this book is slowly unveiling a horrific view of what AI could be. And what was really unnerving to me, and I will jump ahead a little bit. There is a scene where Matheson eventually reveals to his guests this AI that he has created that looks really, it's just creepy looking. It's like, it's not an android. It's like, it's got a humanoid form, but it's wearing this like star cloak, and it's got like this weird, almost pyramid looking head. And he introduces this thing, and this AI, this AI basically proceeds to remake humanity in a way that it sees fit, because it thinks that there's imperfections with humanity. And so it really stirs up the question of like, what would happen logically if we create an AI that's so powerful, it decides it knows what's better for us than we do, and it inherently makes us not human by changing us to that degree. And does it against our will. Like, we're like, well, I don't want to be changed. It's like, it's too late. Like, this is better for you. And you're like, but I don't. And all of a sudden we aren't what we are supposed to be. It truly is. And the last chapter is just as batshit crazy as everything. I remember when it came out, there would be often like maybe 2 or 3 months in between chapters, because it wasn't always like a month to month. The creators weren't doing it month to month. And I remember tweeting them at the time, and they respond. I was just like, this is both the most fascinating and like worrisome book I think I've ever read. Like, I can't wait to see what batshit crazy thing you guys do next. And it's just like, I think it's one of those where they didn't have it. I don't think they had it planned out, all for the story arc to that point. I think they had like a baseline of what they wanted to achieve, but it does really feel like each chapter they're like, what's interesting to us right now? Like, what's, as creators, how do we, what's going to make this exciting for us while still maintaining kind of the same thread? But I have read and have consumed so much about dystopic AI, everything from 2001: A Space Odyssey to I, Robot to, Terminator, and like all the graphic novels that talk about, AI for good or for worse. This is the first thing I've ever consumed that really, really, truly, at a visceral level, worried me about AI. Like, I had nightmares about this book, especially after chapter 3, because chapter 3 is really where you're like, oh shit, like, oh wow. I mean, it really hit me. Fortunately, the ending resolves that a little bit, but it's still just because it really does show you, like, this is what happens when there's a benign AI that's not good or evil. It's so advanced it presumes to know what's better for us than we do and doesn't ask our permission. Like what I mean, and that's probably the most likely outcome. I think people always kind of ascribe, morality and good and bad towards what AI might do. Like Terminator's like, evil AI. AI is gone. There's a evil intent to what Skynet is doing, right? I don't see that. Even like Her, which I really honestly, like if I was to choose an outcome that I think is the most logical or reasonable, I think the movie Her, we're going to look back at and go, oh no, that predicted everything. But even Her, there's a sense of like, loving morality. And I'm just like, I honestly feel like it's going to be, if it gets to be so advanced, if there's not going to even be that notion, and it's just going to simply start making things better. So I think for anybody who's really interested in a really left of center, completely original, interesting read, go pick this up as a trade paperback. You can go find it in the Island issues it comes out in, but the trade is really worth it. And then just anybody who wants a really good look at what AI could be, and just something that will kind of flesh out another dimension of how you perceive AI. Like this is really good for that too. And maybe some people won't find it as chilling as I did, but my God, like it like good art should. It's sat with me for a while. Like it really sat with me.
So was this does this trade paperback contain like material that was not in the Island stories?
No, it's a slightly bigger format. So like the pages are slightly bigger. At the very end, I think there's like 2 or 3 pages that just show you like their process, like their drawing style. But there's no like extra inserts or anything. It's just the exact story lifted from the Island and collected in one paperback, which they for a moment they weren't going to do. I actually tweeted them several times. I'm like, please do a trade, because I need to own this in one volume. I need to be able to have this. And they're like, and they finally put one out. So, I don't know if Island is still going. I hope it is, because it was some of my most favorite stuff from 2016 came from the Island. And like I said, I bought at least 3 of the collected trades. But Ancestor by Matt Sheehan and Malachi Ward. These guys, I really, really hope they do other original stuff, because they're a great team, and just their point of view, man. Wow. It's just, I'd never thought I would read something like this impacting and just this good.
Well, so back to the Island versus the trade thing.
Yeah.
Is it this trade paperback? Is it like sort of a self-contained story, or do you get the sense that like they could continue the story in other issues?
Oh God, no! This is a start to finish self-contained story, for sure. There's a start and an end. I mean, you could read the ending and go, "Oh, I can see where this would." It would be a really awkward stretch for them to try to make this something else, like
Gotcha.
continue it on. It's definitely a start to finish. I'm surprised. I mean, I like the fact that they created this over the course of a period of time, because I think that contributed to the sort of hodgepodgey nature of some of the chapters, where you're just like, you just don't know where it's going to go. Like every time you think, oh, we're going this way, it takes a weird left turn, like a really weird left turn. And then you're just like, you're left just holding on by the seat of your pants, trying to figure out where they're going to go. At the same time, like when you read it in one volume, it's just, it does feel like this was meant to be, like, this was never meant to be single issues. This was, this should be its own, collected thing.
Well, that kind of leads into another question I wrote down, which was like, do you think that the medium in which it was published, like this semi-monthly installment series, contributed to the way that the story went and like how it developed?
Oh, definitely, because they didn't, like I said, I am pretty convinced they didn't sit down and go and outline all 4 issues before they started. I think they went, hey, we want to make this 4 or 5. We know we want to get to this point, and then how we get there, the road we get to there is going to be completely by the, we're just going to, every 2 months we'll figure out, we'll write it and draw it based on what we want to do. I do think it's kind of like Lost. Remember back when, to reference Lost on another episode, back during Lost, they put out an episode and we'd have to wait a week. And in that week, it gives you a different dimension in which to consider what you just saw, to talk about it with people. It kind of heightens the overall sort of viewing experience. And I know when this was coming out, like, because it was coming out in pieces over the course of, and it wasn't always a piece a month. It might have been, May they released part 2, and then maybe August they released part 3, And so that gave you time to really sort of, go back and reread it again and think about it again, and just wonder where the heck they were going to go, in the next, like how could they possibly resolve this? So there's something beneficial to that, but I really do. I think if you just pick this up as a collected volume, you're going to get just as much out of it, if not more, because it really, when you read it from start to finish this way, it almost, I don't know, it's a different experience, but it's not a worse experience just because you're not having to wait. I think if anything, makes it even more disconcerting because it is so jarring where the twists and turns that it takes.
Were you hooked into the story like from the first appearance in Ireland?
Oh God, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah, because the first chapter is, it sets up a lot of tone, not necessarily story thread, but just like tone and environment and feeling. Like they get you to this house, and most of the book takes place at this house, and they take you there. But just the ending of the chapter, where the last pages are Peter and his friend realizing that they can't get out, and so you're just like, where? And so immediately you kind of think. You kind of think where they're taking this, and then the next chapter it is absolutely not that at all, and you're like, oh wow, and then the third chapter takes it even completely different, and then but as you go back, you can see it all makes logical sense in the end, but just as you're reading, if you don't know where it's going to go, it truly is the cliffhangers it takes, because each chapter kind of ends on a massive cliffhanger, really satisfying.
Well, then I'll ask another question, which you put to me, which is digital or print for this.
I think you could go either. I think I have the physical version because I just like the collectible artifact of it. The way they set up the pages and the panels, they don't reveal anything, cliffhangery. Like, you're not looking at the left side and like the right side, they're showing something, that's spoilery. They take care into dividing up the pages and panels in a way that's not going to trip you up. However, I think just seeing it panel by panel would also be really interesting. I don't know if they sell this digitally, though, to be honest with you. I don't know if they do. They might. It might be available digitally, but it may just be a physical thing too.
Yeah, I went to the image. It does look like they do.
Okay, great.
I'm on imagecomics.com. But it's funny, when I added it to my cart, I got looped into some other thing. So I don't know if it's actually there. No, okay, there it is. It says digital. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Is there, so I checked out some of the art as I was looking, like I did a Google image search on it. What I couldn't really tell from it is it definitely has this very indie comics vibe of like, the faces are a little squishy looking to me. It's not necessarily like your perfect symmetrical, oval shape or whatever you might, the head shape, does it look like it was created digitally, or does it look like this is like almost brush on paper or something?
Oh, great question. Like the lines are pretty basic and simple. I would imagine they drew it, on a tablet or with a stylus. But I wouldn't be surprised if I found that it was. Well, wait, hang on. The very back tells me this exact answer. Hang on.
Yeah, just looking at, I couldn't like blow up the images enough or get enough fidelity on them to notice, but it almost looked like there was like brush in it, like
they start with pencil drawings for sure, and then they, I think they scan it in and ink it from there. Yeah. So, but the nice thing about the squishy nature of it is it does two things I like. One, it allows the expressions of the faces to be really specific. There's no mistake what these characters are feeling and doing, and especially like when they become more sinister or more scared, it almost amps it up more because there's such a malleability to their faces. The other thing it does is it kind of creates this wavy sort of unsettling. It contributes to the unsettling nature of what you're reading. It's not. There's sort of a wavy, dreamlike quality to it. So you're not. It doesn't ever feel like you're you understand the facts and the constraints of the world, or even the world you're living in. I don't know. And the color, I would say the color scheme too. I am increasingly picky about how things are colored. Like, one of my biggest, and to a lot of people's surprise and probably complaint, I really hate the way The Dark Knight Returns is colored. In a previous episode, we talked about the fact that I own the Dark Knight Returns as a Batman noir, just the pure black and white, just because I like that better. And I know some people like are screaming bloody murder right now because they're like, well, the coloring's genius. I don't agree. I actually, on that same note, the Killing Joke original coloring I hate too. I really like the updated coloring that they did on the Killing Joke, and I own that copy. And again, I'm sure people are screaming bloody murder about why that's terrible. I feel like the gritty nature of that color lends to that book. So here, the coloring, the palette is very deliberate, and it becomes more sort of psychedelic as the story goes on, which again contributes to sort of its uneasy nature. Chapter 2 is largely because chapter 2 takes place in mostly this one room, and it's very sterile and very kind of white and gray. Matheson, the lead character, is in color, but as it progresses, it just becomes more and more, lots of oranges and purples and pinks and reds, kind of take hold, which is, again, it really, it's like they read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics and really applied a lot of the thinking and psychology into this. It really feels considered. When you read a book where you're just like, oh, they thought of everything, feels like it makes sense and has a place here. Every choice feels very deliberate. I always love when that feeling, when you finish a book, you're just like, God dang, they really, nothing was kind of left to chance here. This all feels very like a really good artistic expression.
Yeah, I would almost say like some of the panels I looked at went from just really bright primary, like as you were saying, like psychedelic, like, a ton of primary colors and just really bright and warm. And then some panels looked just really like washy pastel.
Yeah.
So there was just in the few things that I clicked on, there was a great variety, where it maybe was all contained, I don't want to suggest that the palette jumps around, just that it was not exactly like stuck in one way. Like, I can see how the colors they're using the colors to help tell the story,
definitely,
as well. Yeah,
definitely. But yeah, I just I've read it now maybe 6 or 7 times, including to do this, and every time, like, it hasn't lost its punch. It doesn't startle me kind of as intensely as it did that first time. But it's still, you'll read it and just kind of like, you want to sit back and just sort of fear for the future of what we may, what humanity may go through once AI really starts to heat up. When we get to that, there's several articles out there that just talk about how fast AI can scale, but it's the thing that always worries me is that I forget what sort of, there's like a Moore's law kind of explanation that says it takes just as much time to get from 0% to 2% as it does from 2% to 90% of any like new innovative technology. And so we have been slowly inching towards 2% on AI, but once we pass that threshold, like, it's going to just go faster and faster and faster and faster to the point where if you think about how much further along we are than an ant, and imagine an AI, and actually a better way to put this, imagine the thing that I always like, just that really crystallizes this for me. When we talk about AI evolution, imagine asking a question, and imagine version 1 of AI is that AI has, basically, if you ask a question, it would have a year to think about an answer, right? But it would, that year would take place over the course of a second. Now imagine if an AI had 100 years, then 1,000 years, then 10,000 years to answer your question. Like, that's the level. Like, so if you say, you could ask it, how are you today? And imagine you had a year to answer and the kind of answer you get back if I gave you a year to think about nothing but that answer. Then if I gave you 10,000 years to think about how are you today, just like that, just that level of speed and innovation is going to lead to some interesting, really cool, but also probably scary things. And this book fits right alongside that. Like, it gives us, like I said, I'm sounding like a broken record, but it gives us a view of AI that's often not articulated, that I think is really one we should consider.
Huh. Is it we did a whole podcast on like sci-fi and hard sci-fi versus fantasy
Ooh,
sci-fi and
that's
stuff like
great.
that.
Yeah.
Is this would you put this in hard sci-fi? Like do you get the feeling that they have researched some AI facts like those development cycles that you talked about? Is that included in Ancestor?
Um, I would definitely put this under hard sci-fi. It's very accessible hard sci. It's probably psychedelic hard sci-fi, because there's some themes later on that just get really, really out there. Um, I don't know how much research they put into it because they don't get too technical in the details on anything. It's more psychological than anything. It's more about the broad scope of what would happen if a self-obsessed billionaire who invented, this crazy technology wanted to just keep going. Just wanted to base and he was horribly insecure. So he wanted to basically make himself the ultimate human so that everybody else could be the ultimate human with him, and then he wouldn't feel so insecure. So there's a lot of that, like even Peter, the main character, he's got anxiety, and then he's dealing with that the whole time. At some point at the party, he meets this artist, this woman who's an artist, and she talks about her confidence in making her thing. So there's the whole thing it's got this kind of subtext of, emotional availability and confidence and people's place in the world, and what ultimately happens to Peter is both really satisfying as a character arc, and also just it kind of makes you reflect on your own life a little bit. You're like, wow, do I need technology? I mean, maybe all the technology in my life is causing similar issues. I don't know. Or you look around and you see somebody who's miserable, but they're always checking their phone and Twitter and Facebook like all the time.
Yeah.
It's really prescient. As I said in the beginning, this is a really good time to read a book like this, because these are issues that we're only going to keep, even since this book came out, we've had some serious discussions about, is Facebook good for us? So just like these kinds of things, it couldn't have come out at a better time. And I think we'll have at least another 5 to 10 years where it's just going to continue to be relevant.
Cool. Man, that's awesome. And I also love the symmetry of us both picking sci-fi stories, basically. And
yeah,
that's one of the like real fun parts of this podcast is we don't actually discuss the books that we're picking beforehand. So it's always, I don't know, it's always fun to find out where they intersect, like where our interests intersect. And we're always waiting for that one day where we both choose the same book.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's going to happen soon.
Yeah. Until that day, where can people find this podcast?
You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, and anywhere podcasts are downloaded. You can also find our website, findusthere.org, and we'll have other stuff, good stuff there. And we're actually, as I speak, rather, we're updating that website. So hopefully we'll have, by the time you guys look at it, a lot of books, book reviews, a lot of other cool things, obviously all our podcasts, and we're just kind of making it a bigger playground for all this stuff. So findusthere.org, keep that bookmarked and visit often.
Cool. And you can find us on Twitter and Instagram and other places as Find Us There. Just look for that. And Todd and Taylor Show is not the only podcast on the There network. So check us out. Check out Fan Theories, People of Interest, and Wednesday in Westeros. And you can check on all that stuff. And then we will see you next time for another Coffee and Comics.
See ya.